Okay, here we go. AMP1, starting off with this first series of slides, the biochemistry. Now, when you're thinking about life, the smallest unit of life is the cell. It's capable of carrying on all of the functions of life, which we'll talk about in just 1 second. Cells come together to carry out different jobs. So they work together, and each one has a certain job they do. That's the tissues. Then tissues come together to still do more jobs together and all of that. And those are organs. Then organs collect themselves into these systems. And these organ systems, then on top of that is an organism. You and I are organisms. We have this hierarchy of these levels of life within us. And this helps with this division of labor. You have your respiratory system, which is for getting air in and out. You have your circulatory system, which is for moving nutrients and oxygen and waste around in the body and such. You have your digestive system, and on and on and on. Now, what is life? What does life have to have? That's a good question right there, isn't it? But the first thing, it has to have boundaries. You have to have these partitions, boundaries. I don't think there's a better word than boundaries. And at the cellular level, at the lowest life level, you have this. You have these cell membranes. When you get into viruses, they don't have that. They got a protein capsid, and then they have genetic material. They don't have this other boundary and such. So the smallest unit of life with this boundary is the cell. Now, the next thing that living things do is this ability to move. And now you and I are thinking, well, that's to walk across the room. Not just muscles, but it's also moving things across membranes. There are active and passive ways to move things across the membrane, which come later in the next few videos. Responsiveness, irritability, excitability. You catch me in the morning without my coffee, you will understand irritability. But this ability to respond to a stimuli. How do you know something's dead? You poke it with a stick. If it moves, it ain't dead. So living things have this ability to respond. And this is not just at the macro, the organism level, but it's also at the cellular level. Bringing in nutrients. But it's also getting rid of waste. But at this intake, living things must take in nutrients. Bacteria take in nutrients. Fungi take in nutrients. Birds, cats, bats, frogs, dogs, hippos, we all take in nutrients and all. Metabolism. Once you get this energy products in, you have to be able to convert them into a cellular energy form, and that cellular energy form is ATP. Once that's happened, living things have to have the ability to get rid of the waste. When you breathe out, you're getting rid of waste. That waste is CO2. Growth and repair. In a few videos, we'll be going over mitosis. And mitosis is this way that cells grow and organisms repair themselves. And the last one there is reproduction. Life must be able to reproduce. The individual organism does not have to reproduce to stay alive. Life has to enable the perpetuation of the species. Life has to be able to reproduce. One of the things in a living organism is this balance, this internal balance. And homeostasis is an underlying theme throughout the study of anatomy and physiology and a lot of other studies. It's a dynamic process. It's constantly happening. In your always life, the cell. Whoops. All right. So keeping it on here. How does this happen? When you have these levels of anything, be it oxygen, be it sodium, be it water, you have these ranges that the cell likes, that the body likes. And usually when it's pushed out of that optimum position, things kick in to try to bring it back. That's a feedback. Most mechanisms in the human body and the cell and living things, they use a negative feedback. And you can look at how a thermostat in your house, you set the temperature at 72. If it gets above 72, a switch is thrown, cold air is pushed into the room in order to bring the temperature down to 72. That's a negative feedback. If it's set, it gets too low, a switch is thrown and warm air is pushed into the room to bring the temperature back up. That is a negative feedback. So you have an effector and you have these receptors and such, but it's a system that turns itself off. So it's a self-regulating system. Now there are a few that are positive feedback. So in a positive feedback, things happen, and then in order to turn it off requires an external force. Something outside of the organism turns it off. So you see a few right there, like blood clotting, labor contractions, and then of course digestion. Those are the three good examples of positive feedbacks in the human body, for sure. Life is composed of chemicals. People freak out when you start talking chemistry. They don't like chemistry. I don't know why. You got to figure that out. But living things, the cell is the smallest, but beneath that you do have these elements and all. And these elements come together to form compounds and to form molecules. And in life, we have these simpler ones that are found within the cytoplasm, the cytosol, the fluid within the cell. And you have those that are, we find them inside, and then we have a few that we find right on the outside of the membrane, if you will. So the intracellular ones are the ones found within the cytoplasm. The extracellular are the ones found just right on the outside. And a couple of big ones, potassium is the major one on the inside. Sodium is the major one on the outside. Those ions help a cell respond to a stimulus. A couple of other ones that are important that are within the cell itself and within your blood plasma are the hydrogen ion, which you can put air quotes around that and call that acid, and then the bicarbonate, the HCO3, that's the bicarbonate. These two, they're constituents, they're parts of this substance known as carbonic acid. And carbonic acid will break apart, it will dissociate, forming the hydrogen and the bicarbonate. And then it acts like a seesaw, a teeter-totter. And if you get too much acid on one side, it'll push back the opposite side. If you don't have enough, it'll push back to that side. It's Le Chartier's principle. You can look that one up. I ain't spelling it, but you can look it up. But this helps to maintain the pH of the cell. And cells need to be at a pH of 7.4. Your blood is at 7.4. The cells are at 7.4. They're always a slightly alkaline. 7 is neutral. You go below 7, it's acid. You go above 7, it's alkaline. 7.4 is slightly alkaline. If you'll take that 7.4 and kind of go out a number, so 735 to 745, if the cell moves down toward the 7.35, the cell is becoming acidic. If it goes above that, it goes to 7.45, the cell is becoming alkaline. Now, in normal water, you think 7 is neutral. In life, 7 is dangerous. Humans go into medical conditions and such, they quit breathing, CO2 levels accumulate, the pH of the body drops, and it drops from 7.4 to 7.3 to 7.2 to 7. And as that happens, death is imminent. These molecules and such, they are held together with bonds, by bonding, chemical bonding. And there's different types of chemical bondings. And bonds result from the interaction of electrons. You don't have to worry about the protons and the neutrons. It's the electrons. When it comes to electrons, you can steal them. So when you do that, you get these ions, positive ions and negative ions. And these ions stick together kind of like magnets sticking together, and those are known as ionic bonds. You can share the electrons, and when you share, that's a covalency. So there's these covalent bonds. These bonds are pretty strong. Ionic bonds are strong as well, very strong. In this sharing, in this covalent bond production, in this sharing, the sharing can be unequal. And when that happens, you get this polarity. And polarity means you have a positive end and a negative end. And that sets up a lot of conditions within this fluid of life, this polarity and such. So some things are polar, some things are non-polar. So we would say that water is polar, oil is non-polar. Does oil and water mix? No. But things that are polar will dissolve in polar solvents. Things that are non-polar will dissolve in non-polar solvents. There's a rule, it's stated simply, like dissolves like. And that's a rule that you can put in your pocket and keep with you. And it applies to a lot of things. It explains a lot of things. Like dissolves like. Another type of bond that we'll mention right here, then we'll quit, are hydrogen bonds. When you have a large molecule and you have these electrically negative elements like oxygen, nitrogen, anything way over there on the right side of the chart, they tend to accumulate electrons and they get a negative charge. Hydrogens tend to have a positive charge, and they stick. It's like static electricity, they stick together. And a lot of your larger molecules have shapes to them, and they're held together by these hydrogen bonds. And these bonds are when you think about that list of a previous bond, these bonds are not as strong. They're weak bonds, and so they can be broken very easily. And when we start talking about the normal shape of things, the natural shape of things, when you break the hydrogen bonds, be it with temperature, with acids or bases, with ionic radiation, with heavy metals and such, you can alter the hydrogen bonding and you can alter the shape. So we can say that you will denature certain shapes of molecules and such by affecting their hydrogen bonds. And also, okay, we'll stop right there.